Wow. I'd rather be mauled by a wild hippogriff than date you. That is... Wow, Lily is not best pleased. Hello there, Pixies. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a continuation of reading my old Harry Potter fanfiction that I wrote when I was 17. If you are new here, please don't forget to click that big red subscribe button down below and the notification bell next to it, because I post Harry Potter videos every single week and I don't want you to miss out on them. If you've missed the other parts, they will be up there in the cards, so don't forget to check those out before you listen to this one, because it'll be a bit confusing if you don't. Without further ado, let's get into chapter 5 of my story. Oh look, my iPad matches my outfit. Chapter 5, Halloween. I know it's a few days late, but we're doing the Halloween chapter now, so pretend it's Halloween again. Imelda had gone straight to the girls' dormitory once everyone had come back from the feast. Sirius had flopped himself into his usual seat by the fireplace and tried to look casual, but the fact was that he couldn't. Sirius didn't like being alone with Imelda because he never really knew what to say to her. He preferred having James or Remus with him. She was the only girl he couldn't really talk to. He knew that James had left him on purpose and was very annoyed with him, but he was also puzzled with himself. Why had he felt the need to tell her about their master plan? Why did he seek her approval? He shouldn't really care what she thought. She wasn't a very close friend, or was she? I think Sirius has got some feelings, you know, and he shouldn't be afraid to catch feelings. Oh gosh, that song is in my head now. After all, he confided his feelings about Regulus to her. He didn't know why, it just felt right, and she had such an earnest look on her face when she asked what was wrong. He was like putty in her hands. That was so cheesy. I could have cut that down by like 3 sentences and have got the point across. But basically, Sirius is having a few feelings that he's a little puzzled about. Remus' voice snapped him out of his reverie. Sirius, why weren't you at the feast? It was great. Sirius was pleased to see that Remus was cheerful and looked quite well. He was even glowing slightly. Wasn't hungry, Moony. Fancy a game of wizard's chess? Remus shook his head. James and Peter will be back in a bit. James is getting some evening Quidditch practice for the game, and Peter's with him. I thought I'd just talk to you. I haven't for a while because of, well, you know. He trailed off darkly. Remus, can I ask you a question? Remus nodded. What do you think of Imelda? He continued, very uneasily. I can't ask James. He'll just tease me, and I know you won't, he said quickly. Remus gave a weak smile and replied, I don't know what you want my opinion on, Sirius. Is it her personality, her looks, whether she suits you or not? Sirius knew he was being teased, but he also knew that Remus would give him a proper answer, as he was the sensitive marauder. All of the above, I suppose. But this isn't for me. It's for a friend. That old chestnut. Remus laughed modestly. Oh, for a friend, is it? Well, I have to admit, she's very pretty, and if you ask any boy from any house in our year, or above, they'll tell you the same. But looks don't count for everything. Lucky for her, she has some substance too. She's a good person, but a bit spirited, and she tends not to listen when it doesn't suit her. She's a lot like your friend, if you ask me. Sirius rolled his eyes. Oh, I love Remus. He's so sweet, and he's really self-aware for his age. In my head, Remus was always the most self-aware of the 4 of them, even when he was 13, which is the age that they all are in this little story that I've written. Do you think she feels the same way about my friend as he does about her? This is all hypothetical, by the way. I mean, there are plenty of other girls my friend likes, and he isn't actually sure that he likes her in that way. But before Remus could answer, Lily Evans approached them. Naturally, Sirius didn't want to continue the conversation in front of Imelda's best friend. Have either of you seen Melly? She didn't come to the feast and she can't still be with Professor Dumbledore. Taking Imelda's emotional state into account, Sirius lied and said that he hadn't seen her since their meeting in Dumbledore's office. Lily shrugged and turned away, although she looked troubled. Sirius wasn't sure if Imelda would tell Lily about Remus. He didn't think she would, but at the moment, the main issue was Professor Lockheed and Vladimir. Wow, I don't have very good commas and grammar in this sentence at all. I could barely read it, but you know, it happens. Halloween was fast approaching, and things were looking optimistic for Remus, for the first time. James and Sirius decided to make the most of this newly energised Remus while they could, as it was only a matter of 2 weeks until the monthly hell would begin. Imelda had started to come to terms with Remus's furry little problem, as James liked to call it. Other students had begun to think Remus had a badly behaved pet rabbit. But it had proved difficult to keep quiet around Remus and Lily, and even more so with the added pressure of attempting to keep Professor Lockheed and Vladimir's unhealthy relationship on the down low as well. She never really knew whether to tell Lily about Remus. Some days she was on the verge of saying something to her, but other days she felt it was too soon. Since Sirius' talk with Imelda, the two of them had resolved their issues and were talking as usual. The first Quidditch match of the season against Hufflepuff had gone in Gryffindor's favour, with their house winning 240-90. Oh, that is a big loss on part of Hufflepuff. I'm so sorry, Hufflepuffs. That's painful. Oof. There had been a riotous party in Gryffindor Common Room, which finally came to an end at around 1 a.m, when Professor McGonagall had charged in through the portrait hole looking slightly murderous. Lily, Sirius and Imelda couldn't help noticing that Professor Lockheed's lessons weren't as fun as they used to be. In fact, the whole school had noted it in one way or another. She had become very subdued and cautious, and most of the time, Vladimir was nowhere to be seen. Sirius and Imelda knew that Professor Lockheed was afraid of what the Ministry would do if they found out about her and Vladimir. Sirius also had first-hand knowledge of what the punishment would be for the treachery. Unbeknownst to most of the Ministry, many of their co-workers were Death Eaters, and would feel no way about torturing or even murdering blood traitors and mudbloods in the quest for control. The Marauders were fearful for her life, and so was she. It's like super serious. I mean, I can't imagine a world where you couldn't love who you wanted to love and you'd actually be killed for it and tortured. I mean, obviously that world has existed before and it still exists in some part of the world, but oh, it's just horrible. It's really dark, and it's a dark thing to be dealing with at 13-year-olds. It's just, yeah, it's not something you want to be thinking about when you're about to take exams and there's girls and boys and all these, you know, normal teenage things, and then that is on your plate too. Imelda sat by the fireplace, staring blankly at the flames. She didn't know how, but she was going to tell Lily about Remus. She had a right to know, and if Imelda kept it to herself, she would be doing exactly what had been done to her. "You are unbelievable, Potter!" Lily screeched, as she and James stomped their way through the portrait hole. Everyone watched with bated breath as the very loud scene unfolded. "Come on, Evans, it was only a joke. I don't think Snape minded." Lily looked murderous. Her flaming red hair burned even brighter than usual, and it really did look like she was on fire. "I'm sick of you, Potter. You treat Severus like dirt for no other reason than simply disliking him. You strut around the castle like you're the be-all and end-all. You hex passers-by just because you're bored, and then you have the audacity to tell me that you're not a bullying, arrogant, selfish little toe rag. If you go out with me, I promise I won't annoy Snape anymore." You think I'd go out with you? I'd rather be mauled by a wild hippogriff than go out with you. And with that, Lily promptly left the room, leaving the audience open-mouthed in astonishment, and leaving James utterly humiliated. Wow. I'd rather be mauled by a wild hippogriff than date you. That is... Wow, Lily is not best pleased. Comment down below if you would date James Potter. And I'll put a poll in there as well, up in the cards. This is just... It's so funny. I'd rather be mauled by a wild hippogriff. Okay, I gotta get back into the flow of the story now. Imelda didn't even try to look casual. She glared as hard as she could at James, who said, "He was disrespecting her. I was just being honourable. Anyway, he deserves it. Sometimes, Potter, you really are an idiot. Snape's her friend. You'll do well to remember that. And for Merlin's sake, stop hexing people." October 31st had finally approached, and the whole school was feeling festive. Wow, what a time skip. That is the most awkward time skip I've ever written, I think. Pumpkin lanterns hovered on the ceiling of the Great Hall, real bats flew around the corridors, Nearly Headless Nick and the Fat Friar sang another Halloween song, and the Fat Lady and Violet were drunk as usual. Imelda and Lily didn't feel quite as festive as everyone else, though. Lily was upset with Severus, who seemed to have an unhealthy attraction to the dark arts, and seemed to think it would impress her. Imelda had felt a sense of foreboding as soon as she'd woken up that morning, and she suspected it had something to do with Lockheed and Vladimir. She'd tried to shake it off all day, but she couldn't help remembering what Professor Sinistra had told her in her first divination class. "You seem to possess the sight beyond the physical world and into the spiritual realms." Perhaps it was a premonition of some sort. Whatever it was, she didn't like it. "I do love Halloween and all that, but those bats aren't hygienic. One of them pooped all over me robes. It's a good thing we're witches, 'cause that would have taken ages to get off without magic," Siobhan exclaimed, with an irritated look on her face. Sorry for my terrible Irish accent, by the way. Lily, Imelda and their friends Siobhan and Ebony sat at the end of the Gryffindor table, as far away from the Marauders as possible for Lily's sake. Dumbledore stood up to announce the feast. "A good evening to you all. I am sure you will all appreciate the charmless work of our dear Professor Flitwick, who has placed a hover charm on the pumpkins above you. Now, without further ado, happy Halloween, and let the feast begin." Boom! Yes, it says boom. I wrote boom. Sorry guys, it's really bad. Yikes, I'm cringing. Everyone gasped at the... Can't even speak now. Everyone gasped as the form of a large green skull with a serpent's tongue appeared above the head of Professor Lockheed, whose face had turned a pasty grey colour, and her eyes a murky blue. Imelda spotted the face of Avery from the Slytherins table. He looked fiendishly delighted when he saw the mark of the Dark Lord. The Dark Mark. This could only mean one thing. Imelda's instinct had been correct. Lockheed let out a piercing scream and fell to the ground, writhing and flailing, a look of anguish on her face. Then a voice spoke from inside the skull's head, a terrible, hissing voice. "Let this be a warning to you, children. It is not wise to anger the Dark Lord. If you do not wish to experience this pain, you will not associate with those inferior to you. Join me, and you will thrive." Do you like my Voldemort impression? Lockheed continued to scream and writhe as the dark mark faded away. The whole school looked panicked, even the Slytherins. Dumbledore looked extremely grave. He stared for a moment at the writhing body, and then at Imelda, with a curious glint in his eyes. Cliffhangers. Tell me, what did you think of this chapter? For me personally, I've never liked this chapter. After I wrote it, I was like, this chapter's just weird. Like, so many things happen to it. So many things happen in this chapter and none of them seem very connected. And I just think to myself, I could have written that so much better. But it's still okay and it got the job done. It was a cliffhanger. What do you think's going to happen to Professor Lockheed? Let me know. Do you think she's okay? She could be very, 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 very dead. Or she could be alive. and you'll never know unless you watch the next one. So let me know, what do you think happened to Professor Lockheed? If you did like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and share it around if you want to, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.